Shalom. First off, I want to give all honors, all glory, and all praises to Yahweh, Bahashim Yahweh Shai, Bahashim Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone GMS, who are the ones that taught us His word and His truth. Shalom to the elects of Israel, beginning with the 144,000 who were chosen from the foundation of the earth, and to all you Akim that preach His word for the edification of the elect and of the body. I pray that peace and mercy is bestowed upon you by Yahweh, Bahashim Yahweh Shai, as we enter into these last days. This is the brother Halal from GMS branch of Chicago, coming at you with another lesson, sincerity and the truth. And this lesson is going to be about how, the allies, or the once allies of America, of Babylon the Great, are now starting to, have animosity, and hatred towards Babylon the Great. Because going to into the book of Revelation, it said that what? These nations shall hate the whore. And when you go into the book of Revelation, the whore that sat upon the dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, that whore represents Babylon the Great, or America spiritually. Because America is known as the melting pot of all cultures, where all people from different walks of life, from different races and ethnicities, come to enjoy the land of opportunity. But what was once known as the land of opportunity, is now being known as the land of sorrow and mourning and lamentation. And it's eventually all going to culminate in World War III, in the return of Yahweh Shai in the midst of all that chaos that's going on. So I'm going to let this Instagram video play, and may this lesson be edifying to all those who are watching.
I will not hesitate. If the United States escalates, I will not hesitate to shut the electricity off completely. Believe me when I say I do not want to do this. I feel terrible for the American people because it's not the American people who started this trade war. It's one person who's responsible. That's President Trump. I'd rather be working together. I want to sell the U.S. more energy, more electricity, more critical minerals. I want to make Canada and the United States the richest, most successful, safest, most secure 2 countries on the planet. But as Premier, my number one job is to protect the people of Ontario and in hand protect the people of Canada. I will do whatever it takes. I will fight like I've never fought before to protect Ontario.
So here it is. I don't know whether this guy is the president of Canada or he's the minister of Canada, but he's basically giving a warning to America, to Donald Trump, that basically if they keep on imposing tariffs or taxes, on imported goods, that they're eventually going to respond by turning off, the electricity, in America. To prevent, says Canada now threatening to shut off electricity to the United States to prevent becoming the 51st state. Because they're also trying to make Canada the 51st state of the United States of America. So the allies of America are starting to think differently about, Babylon the Great. And I came across this article online at CNN.com. It says, Canada will have to dramatically reduce its reliance on the United States as the 2 countries' relationship darkens. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney warned on Thursday, adding to the old bilateral relationship was over. So they're now declaring that the relationship that they once had, with the United States of America is now over. Due to all this stuff that's going on and all this tension among these different nations over goods and services and oils and foods and whatnot. And now you have Donald Trump, imposing these tariffs on China, and on these other nations. And although tariffs obviously have a purpose, this time around, because this is not the first time that Trump has imposed tariffs. The first time that I believe Trump did it was in March of 2018, and America ended up losing around $621 billion, which had never been seen since the economic crash of 2008. And I covered that in a lesson I did, I believe last week. But reading the second paragraph, it says, after holding a cabinet meeting to discuss Canada's response to U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff threats, Carney told reporters in Ottawa that he foresaw the coming of a fundamentally different relationship between the two countries. The old relationship we had with the United States, based on deepening integration of our economies and tight security and military cooperation, is over. It says it is clear that America is no longer a reliable partner. It is possible that with comprehensive negotiations, we could reestablish an element of confidence, but there will be no going backwards, the Canadian leader said, adding the future governments will have to grapple with the same change dynamic. So, there you have it. The Prime Minister of Canada is now declaring that they no longer have a relationship with America, and that they're going to have to rely more on their own goods and services rather than relying, on America, on America. I mean, so like on Babylon the Great. But while all this stuff is going on, the complete infrastructure of Babylon the Great is falling. And Trump knows this, so he's going to try to what? Come down with that great wrath. But let's go to the book of Obadiah. The book of Obadiah, chapter 1 and verse 7. And this right here is concerning Esau, Edom, which are the so-called white man, woman, and child today, which are the people who are ruling the earth right now and who rule Babylon the Great, with the king of Babylon the Great being Donald Trump. This is the book of Obadiah, chapter 1 and verse 7. It says, all the men of thine confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread have laid a wound under thee, and there is none understanding in him. So this breakdown, to break this down, this has a spiritual meaning behind it. Basically saying that all the allies, and the closely knit friends of America are now starting to turn their face away from America and, pull their shoulder away from America's hand. Because they they hate America. They hate Babylon the Great. They look at Americans as spoiled. They look at America as the main cash crop and feel like they're not getting, what they deserve, and that they're only giving peace to America and not receiving any in return. So with these tariffs being given out by Donald Trump, we're going to start to see a pushback, especially between Canada and China, because America is no longer the number one superpower in the earth. In China, you have cars that can turn into boats. There's more advanced technology in other countries than than technology that's in America. So Babylon the Great is no longer the number one superpower in the earth, and these other nations know that. Verse 8, shall I not in that day, saith Yahweh, even destroy the wise men out of Edom, and understanding out of the mount of Esau? And thy mighty men, O Teman, shall be dismayed to the end, and every one of the mount of Esau may be cut off by slaughter. So wisdom is being taken away, from the Edomites. They no longer have the wisdom and understanding on how to really govern a country, and really, they're not natural born leaders. That's why these Edomite leaders are failing at what they're doing, because they are not natural born leaders, man. They were created to be natural born servants to the Israelites in particular. So therefore, when they are given a position of power, they abuse themselves through overmuch liberty. Just like it says about the woman in the book of Sirach. But let's go into the book of 2nd Ezra, chapter 6. As a matter of fact, I'll start up at verse 7 and I'll skip down. It says, then I answered and I said, what shall be the parting asunder of the times? And what shall be the end of the first and the beginning of it that followeth? So the prophet Ezra is asking the angel, what shall be the end of the first age, or the end of the first world, and the beginning of the age that follows the end of the previous? Verse 8, and he said unto me, from Abraham unto Isaac, when Jacob and Esau were born of him, Jacob's hand held first the heel of Esau. And this right here is symbolic. Verse 9, for Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth. So the scriptures tell you, and you can also read up on this in the book of Isaiah chapter 63, that Esau will be the nation that will rule at the end of the world, before the return of who the world calls Christ, which his name is Yahweh Shai, and that the Israelites will be the next rulers of the next kingdom to come, which is the kingdom of Yahweh Shemel Shai, which will come down from heaven. Revelation chapter 21 and verse 1 on down. But let's skip down to verse 22 and let's see, the signs and the things that will happen at the end of Esau's world. 2nd Ezra 6 and verse 22. And suddenly shall the sown places appear unsown, and the full storehouses shall suddenly be found empty. And that's what we're seeing all over America. There are many abandoned places in America that were once major attractions, such as movie theaters, abandoned roller coaster, abandoned tourist attractions, especially in Chicago. You have many places that were once booming businesses that are now empty, abandoned buildings with grass growing all over. So the houses are appearing unsown all across Babylon the Great, which signifies that the overall, value of this place economically is going down. It says the full storehouses shall suddenly be found empty. The trumpet shall give a sound, and when every man heareth, they shall suddenly be afraid. And at that time shall friends fight one against another like enemies, and the earth shall stand in fear with those that dwell therein. The springs of the fountain shall stand still, and in 3 hours they shall not run. So right, you're going to have friends fighting one against another. People, the scriptures say what? The love of many shall wax cold. Meaning that the love of many is going to fade. In the Greek word, and that scripture in the book of Matthew 24, when it says the love of many shall wax cold, the Greek word for the word cold is psycho. So people are going to become psychotic out here, man. And these trade wars that's happening between these nations, if it continues to go on, all countries involved are going to lose billions of dollars, especially America. Just like they did the last time when Donald Trump imposed tariffs on China back in March of 2018. So that's going to lead to mass famines, man. And this right here is what's going to happen as a result. I'm going to end this off with the book of Isaiah chapter 13 and verse 9. And it says, behold, the day of Yahweh cometh cruel, both with wrath and fierce anger, to lay the land desolate, and he shall destroy the sinners thereof out of it. Right, the book of Isaiah says that the slain of the Lord shall be many. Many people will be taken, many people will experience and have an outer body experience in these last days. The day of the Lord is going to come both with wrath and with cruelness. A day of darkness and gloominess. Verse 10, the stars of heaven and the constellations shall not give their light. The sun shall be turned into darkness and is going forth, and the moon shall not cause her light to shine, which goes into what? The signs in the skies, man. The solar eclipses, all the eclipses that's been happening. You had one happen on the day of the Passover on March 13th. So this all signifies that the Lord is about to make his return, man. Going into the book of 2nd Ezra 9 and verse 1. Verse 11, and I will punish the world for their evil and the wicked for their iniquity, and I will cause the arrogancy of the proud to cease, and will lay low the haughtiness of the terrible. So this punishment is going to be meant to punish the wicked, man. And who is the border of wickedness? According to the scriptures, Esau, Edom. But 2/3 of our people and these heathens are going to be destroyed as well, man. The only reason it's called Jacob's trouble is because the Lord only cares about Jacob. That's the only nation who the Lord cares to correct, man. It says, I will punish the world for their evil and the wicked for their iniquity, and I will cause the arrogancy of the proud to cease, and will lay low the haughtiness of the terrible. I will make a man. Slacky, I continue down. It said, verse 13, therefore I will shake the heavens and the earth shall remove out of her place in the wrath of the Lord of hosts, and in the day of his fierce anger. And it shall be as a chased roe and as a sheep that no man taketh up. Then shall every man return to his own people and flee everyone to his own land. Everyone that is found shall be thrust through, and everyone that is joined unto them shall fall by the sword. So there's going to be a lot of death out here when this trouble comes. The children shall also be dashed to pieces before their eyes. Their houses shall be spoiled, and their wives ravished. When you look to the right, you can see what it says in the NLT. When it's talking about the wives, man. I'm not gonna read what the word says, but you can see it on the right side of the screen, man. So this right here is gonna be a result of what's gonna happen, which will lead to the end of Babylon and the hopeful return. The definite return of Yahweh Shai. And that's what we're waiting for, man, because this right here is not our world. This place was not meant to make us comfortable. It was actually meant for our destruction, from the foundation all the way up. But this place is about to meet a very terrible end at the hands of Yahweh Shemel Shai, through his wisdom and his ways, man. And may we make it out of that trouble. But that's it. I hope this lesson was edifying. I want to give all honor, glory, and praises to Yahweh, by Hashem Yahweh Shai, by Hashem Akakwadash, double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone J. Master, Ruel Shalom, Kwam Yasharala, and Abad Babal.